I can tell you exactly. Of course, I started piano at 5 years old with my mother. She sent me to a succession of teachers, including my last significant teacher, the late Esther Batson, and her sister, Sylvia Robin. I always had piano. Piano was something that I did all of the time. Conducting, I can tell you exactly where it started. Under Lindy and Bodden-Rich at St. Mary's College, we took a tour in 1979 to an international music festival in Austria. That was my first international trip. And when we got to Austria, it's the first time we were two choirs, one from St. Mary's College, one from St. Joseph's Convent. And for the first time in my life, we had to sing with an orchestra. And when I saw the youth in the orchestra, but even more, I was mesmerized by the person in front of the orchestra, the conductor. And at that moment, I said, I want to be that person. I can tell you that that's exactly the moment, and I never looked back from there. My journey, starting out in my total educational and professional career, started out at Temple University, Philadelphia, where I left Trinidad in 1983 to pursue a degree in music education with a specialization in piano. That quickly became a specialization in piano with voice. Then it became an enhanced performance and music education, still with voice. While there, one of my favorite professors, Deputy Dean Jan Diamron, discovered that I could also do conducting. Now, everybody was required to do conducting, but for someone, I took to it. So I was advised and encouraged to do conducting at the graduate level. And therefore, I pursued initially choral conducting, eventually instrumental conducting. And therefore, I find myself now, as I'm closing up my professional career at the University of the West Indies, as, among other things, besides administration, as a teacher of voice, teacher of piano, and a conductor of the UWI Arts Chorale, UWI Arts Steel, and I have done orchestras. I have done the National Steel Symphony Orchestra. So all from simple beginnings as music education, piano, I've got this entire evolution in my professional career. In my career, gosh, so many persons, I could go a list of names. However, in Trinidad and Tobago, certainly my mother, always right there behind me, started me off. Sister Jean Devnish was one of my first major teachers, the late Sister Jean. I mentioned Esther Batson, her sister Sylvia Robin. These were very influential teachers within Trinidad and Tobago for piano, and they have educated some of the best persons who are still in the field. Externally, I really have to thank Gail Polk, who was my mentor, the late Gail Polk in conducting. Alan Harler was my graduate level teacher, and then I also pursued piano with a number of persons. One of the names I can't believe is slipping me now, but will come back to me. Who helped me also to do what else I do, which is professional piano accompaniment. And his name is Lambert Orkis, and he is the major pianist with the National Steel Symphony of the United States. And he was pivotal in changing the way that I both play piano, but even more accompany professionally, which is what I do quite a lot now as well. Well, I can speak secondary school, definitely very inspirational. I worked under Lindy and Bodden-Rich, who besides herself was Trinidad, the late Lindy and Bodden-Rich was a brilliant pianist. And I learned by watching her about her accompanying. But even more important, she was a brilliant choral conductor. Tempestuous, very different from what I do, but brilliant. She desired excellence, and she inspired that part of me to be a choral director. At Temple University, Gail Polk, POCH, he was, when I first met him, it was my first choral conductor, and I was absolutely blown away by his methodology, his charisma, his power, his drive. And he returned the favor to me, which is when he went on sabbatical at Temple University. I was honored that he asked me to replace him as his person, and I was just a graduate student. That had never happened before in the Temple's music history, that a student would take over a full-blown choir for a semester. So here was the mentor giving, granting this privilege and honor to the mentee. And I thank him for that eternally. The key for success in this business, get the right teacher. Now, the right teacher may not always be apparent to you, but it has to be somebody, one who's looking out for you, who's a good fit, and who knows you both personally, but who can also advise and coach you technically. Is that an easy thing? Is that to find? The answer is not. Is not always easy. Sometimes you will find it immediately. Sometimes not. Will you have to change from time to time as you evolve? Yes, you will have to change from time to time, from moving from secondary to tertiary to post-tertiary, right? Professionally. So you have to find that. I can't emphasize enough. You must keep practicing your craft. You must be able to take criticism from people in your craft. If you can't take criticism, you're not going to grow. You also have to be able to look at yourself. Sometimes we have access to so many videos and sort of resources now to look at yourself critically. Believe me, I do this all the time and say, how did that habit creep into my playing or my conducting? All of that has to be done. And this is continuous until you stop the profession. You also have to be aware of new trends, what trends apply to you, and what trends are simply a fad. You have to make that differentiation, and you can always consult with people to find out. It's a thing where you have to collaborate with people all of the time. But training, constant training and practice is critical in this business here. Practice. You must practice. 2, you must show up. And 3, you must be dedicated. Find out your strengths, whether singing or within, besides singing or an instrument. Find out what you do best, how you do best. Find out if your work is best done on your own instrument or singing, or do you have the facility, I include myself, that you can direct people, that you can lead, or do you have a facility to teach, or critically important for arts, do you have a facility after with all of your music training to administer? Because that's where to manage, because all of those are significant parts of it. Discover what your niche is or what your combination of niches are. I happen to be an administrator, but I also am a pianist. I've done some singing and I can conduct. All of those reside in me. Now, other persons also do composition and arrangement. Those don't reside with me. Perhaps I'm too lazy. Yeah, people can laugh at me for that. That's okay. But I'm not looking to do every single thing. I know what I do best, which still, and that's another thing, discover your diversity in the field. You cannot be too narrow in this field, otherwise you're not employable. So discover your traits, the 3 or 4 things that work well for you, and work them alongside each other. You will be successful. So my major 2 things are conducting and piano. Conducting, I do this 3 times, sometimes 4 times a week, and I'm actively involved in rehearsing with groups. Recently, I've been doing a lot of major piano accompanying, quite a lot. And therefore, there was a recent project which happened in, I want to say March, or is it April 2025, where I had to play a major work for 75 minutes. That required every other day 2.5 to 3 hours of piano practice. And some days, not just every other day, it had to be done. These days, especially, I have to practice anywhere minimum between an hour, and it can go up to 2.5, sometimes 3 hours, depending on the projects. It has to be done that way in order to keep my skills up at a level. And it's so surprising that a student recently said, "You still have to practice?" And I said, yes, you never have to stop practicing. It's a skill, and I have to constantly keep refining my skills. That's my current training. One of the anecdotes which I can say, which will help to speak about things which change in my career. Strange enough, has almost nothing to do with music, but came out of music, which is the ability to make decisions at the right time. My late father, God rest his soul, promised me a vehicle to drive myself to a wedding when I was late teenage. And the vehicle didn't come in time, and I didn't leave in time by public transport, and I missed the wedding. So the people had no music at their ceremony. That taught me there and then about in music and in professional careers, there's a 0 moment to make a decision. And I have applied that almost at every situation, not just about travel, about decisions, about personnel, about myself. I always determine that there's a zero moment, and once that moment comes, make the decision and act on it. It is pivotal to almost everything, and smaller things and in larger things that you have to do. That was a big moment for me. I've never forgotten that, and it was painful, but it has served me well in the longer run. In performance, anything can happen. And one of my performances in the United States, I got on stage and I was in my tux proudly and conducting. But in hustling to prepare, I don't think I secured my cummerbund. So as I'm conducting, my cummerbund decided to slide down my legs. And because it was dark, the audience barely noticed it, but it eventually resided on the floor. And I just had to step out of it and prod it aside. This is in full view of the audience. I had to go to collect, it always seems to involve tuxedos. I had to collect my tuxedo from Temple University on a Sunday, and the train was supposed to stop at a stop, and it slowed down and didn't stop. And I had a moment, again, a zero moment to decide what to do. So I jumped off the train and damaged myself. I had to hobble all the way to get my tuxedo and do a very painful performance. But it was done. Looking at it now, I don't know if I probably would have decided differently now, but at the moment, it seemed a good decision. In any performance or going into performance, and I gave this advice about what is the composure required. A performer must be, I've used the word bloody-minded. You must deliver performance by shutting out whatever has happened. And I've had all kinds of things happen to me before performances. There are other things as well. But you must, as you're going onto the stage, shut all of that out, deliver the product on stage, and then get back off. Unfortunately, what happens is that when you get to be that practiced, people can actually think of you as cold, because in other situations, you learn to shut people off if you become too practiced in it in terms of delivering your product. But unfortunately, it is part of what is necessary, because being on stage demands total concentration and immersion in your craft. And I've had this conversation as one of the things I've shared with students and people younger, that when you're heading onto that stage and you get on stage, you must be totally immersed in the delivery of what you're doing. And there's no substitute for it. The audience doesn't care about what you have done before or what's going to happen, what has happened. The challenges of working within Trinidad and Tobago are the challenges of anybody who has a classical music background about opportunities. But I happen to believe that you create your own opportunities. I was delighted and honored to be the first conductor of the National Steel Symphony Orchestra. That's in 2007. Working with the government of Trinidad and Tobago is a challenge itself because of the layers of bureaucracy. And also, since I do a lot of work, besides choral work, I do a lot of work with steel pan. One of the frustrating things is that within Trinidad and Tobago, I believe our vision for steel pan is quite myopic. It's very narrow. And if we don't brand ourselves differently and occupy a different type of headspace with it, I think we're going to get lost, because externally, they're racing ahead to different types of innovations. And I really want us to get caught up with those innovations. People have looked at my work. They think that my work is sometimes too classical. And I have nothing to say except that, yes, it is classical, not too classical, but I also offer different types of ways of thinking about steel band, which is a more orchestral way rather than a more band way. And I'm trying to influence people who are coming after me to think about that as a necessary way of broadening the appeal of steel pan.
And you have no issue publishing these thoughts?
Oh, not at all.
Okay, good.
Oh, no. At this time, no, people need to hear them bluntly, and if they think it's controversial, I think I'm sorry, if it's on them, I think they're being silly. We need to have different types of voices to inhabit the space. Steel pan cannot be only panorama and panorama type activities. The days for that are all over. It's too narrow, and it's not going to take us worldwide in ways that we need. The hopes for Trinidad and Tobago in terms of what we do is that we will continue to recognize the value of what we call soft power. And the soft power is what countries use everywhere as part of their diplomacy. They send cultural groups to lead the way, and then the hard-nosed negotiations for other matters follow. We have a soft power resource beside of two things within Trinidad and Tobago: our choirs and our steel pan. Our choirs are, I can tell you, are world beating. Every adjudicator who's ever come here for the Trinidad and Tobago Music Festival has talked about that. Our steel pan, we are still the best in the world, and we need to keep going out and showing the best in the world. I've been very privileged to lead the National Steel Symphony Orchestra in countries as diverse as Costa Rica, in China, in Barbados. And I have watched rooms full of diplomats by anecdote, tell our Trinidad and Tobago top diplomat, how am I going to top this? And if we continue to be strategic about the deployment of our culture, it will also rebound to other aspects of our economy and general culture. But we have to believe in it, and we have to be strategic, and we have to stop playing favorites and develop everybody. And of course, a country which has done this so well is Cuba. Cuba has dominated by their culture and, of course, and their sports as well. But they're dominated by their culture. We're in a position to do the same. That is my hope, both short term, but in the longer term of the worldview of it. I was delighted to be invited in 2007 to conduct the unveiling of the Genesis pans, the G pans, which were developed in secrecy. And then I was invited to work with them. Out of that came the National Steel Symphony Orchestra, which is about the fourth or fifth generation of national steels. So I'm standing on the shoulders of lots of people who have done different national organizations, including the one before it, which was the National Symphony Orchestra. Am I using the National Steel Orchestra? Sorry, the NSO. And then, of course, I did the NSSO. So I was grateful to be able to use that, a new generation of pan, the G pans, which I absolutely love, and it's what they use, and to be able to do stuff with them. Those things have worked well. In terms of choruses, I'm delighted to have led and continue to lead the UE Arts Chorale, which is really the only a type of university chorale in Trinidad and Tobago tertiary level that is able to produce 2 concerts a year of all types of masterworks in line worldwide with any sort of tertiary organization. So I'm delighted to be able to have done that. The changes, I've seen that at the Pan Trinbago level, going back to steel pan, that there have been lots of types of changes institutionally, which are very promising. But now I want to also get them to think about different ways of how steel pan persons learn. So for instance, I think there has to be a bigger embrace of literacy. We cannot continue to have people just learning things and then the music is lost and then the length of time. I'd like to have that next step for all steel pan persons, so that we're not just thinking of steel pan as a seasonal something, but as something worldwide, more than seasonal. And also the productivity has to be faster in order to compete with other professions, with other instruments and singing. Of course, I'm particularly interested in conducting since I teach it. I am absolutely delighted to see that, especially persons coming off of the University of the West Indies. I recently, in a concert, I wrote this speech for the president of the UE Arts Chorale, and I asked to include the names of the number of persons who have now becoming young conductors themselves. And we are at the very forefront in this institution, University of the West Indies at St. Augustine, Creative Arts, that we have been producing a number of conductors. Some have already finished their doctorates. A number of them are going on to their masters. And others who have just come out have established their own conducting niches. That, I must say, the future of conducting with the Trinidad and Tobago is in very safe hands. And I'm delighted to have been a part of it. Music making, there's nothing like it. There's nothing, I used to tell people in other jobs, I always use banking, forgive me bankers, that at the end of the day, you're happy when your things balance or whatever else. You cannot beat the appreciation of persons with applause and people saying that you have done well and that you have lifted their spirits in a way that music can do and the other types of arts can do, that other things, even commodities in your hand, cannot. So I get to do that every day. I get to see people progress all of the time, and I get to see people at their best. I can't say their worst, at their best, because that's the level of training. I demand of people that they be professional. And professional means showing up on time, making sure that you're preparing what you're doing, and then producing on time. It's not an easy thing for people to understand that, because within Trinidad and Tobago, the Greater West Indies, people don't always think still of music making and the other arts as being a profession. So therefore, it's still a hard sell, but it's becoming easier and easier for people to understand that this is a valid profession. But also, we're in a happy space so that we get a lot of highs from it, and that's the wonderful thing. In terms of education, it's actually the same thing. It's about finding people where they are and bringing them forward. It means encouraging. It means taking people apart. It means criticism, but it never means belittling. It means assessing people with bluntness and telling them this is a challenging field, but not challenging because you can't make it. It's challenging because your work is in a public space and the public is unforgiving. Therefore, you must always be at the top of your game. And like a cricketer, every time a cricketer walks out, a batsman walks out, you're starting at zero, no matter what your past glory is. Every single performance, you start at the level of zero, even if you have a reputation. That's the nature of it. And therefore, if you've chosen this profession, just keep that in the back of your mind. You're always reinventing in order to give your public that high and yourself that high in returns. There is the short-term rewarding outcome, which is at every level of performance, you're getting that high. But one of the things about musicians that we do is that we have a longevity. We don't simply stop at the age 6 or the age 65. We continue to produce. As long as we're both physically and mentally able, we're able to continue well into older age. And that, for me, is one of the most rewarding things about this profession. You can continue to be active as a performer and as a teacher until. Oh gosh, yes. I think one of the defining and bittersweet memories that I've never forgotten. I'll probably never experience it again. So one of my best memories, and one that I simply can't forget, is there are two of them, and they both happen to be in the United States. Not that Trinidad hasn't had a lot of memories, but in the United States, I took the chorale and the steel to do a performance at a place which I had worked, which is Amherst Regional High School. And we got up to sing the Black National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing. And the audience, black and white, rose up almost crying as we sang it with them. It's a memory that I was playing piano. I didn't even direct, and the choir singing, and I watched the audience, people sobbing because the power of that. The other thing, which it goes back to my first job in the United States, which was my second job, same school, Amherst Regional High School, which I left after 7 years of teaching, and I'd had a very successful career. And I had announced to them that I would be returning to Trinidad, which was in 2000. And at our last concert, when I walked onto stage to direct the joint choirs, there are 3 choirs plus orchestra, an auditorium of close to 1,000 persons stood up at the start to give me a standing ovation for about 3 minutes. It's probably something which I've never will experience. It was absolutely overwhelming, bittersweet, but my goodness, I now understand when people get that sort of thing, what it can feel like. And yeah, it was something I certainly will never forget. Okay. But yet I am encouraged by my colleagues here who have supported every particular endeavor. Satinan Sharma, who just retired, was a close colleague. We actually competed against each other in our youth and then found ourselves close colleagues. When I got here, most important, the late Dr. Anne Marion Osborne, who took me out to university without practically an interview, just said, I know your progress, your prowess, I'm going to take you on. And I'm eternally grateful for her for bringing me into the UE fold. In the University of the West Indies in 2016, I was awarded the Vice Chancellor's Award for Service, public service and service to university. Clearly, quite a wonderful experience. I didn't expect it, and certainly one of the biggest achievements here. And I must say that the staff at the Department of Creative and Festival Arts was even more wonderful too, in that they called me for a retirement function for somebody, and when I walked in, was actually to add to that honor to celebrate the achievement, which was beautifully done. Um, just I've just been very lucky that a number of performances over the years, both in the United States and here in Trinidad and Tobago, have gone superbly. I'm grateful to the legions of persons, of both students and other and community members who have contributed to that. There's really nothing else to say. There are just too many to mention, and wherever we have done it, it's just been something. And that's the life I've had a lot of successes, and I'm very grateful. But as a conductor, especially, it's never alone. It's always with people who have trusted me to lead them to those types of successes. Have I ever considered stopping what I do? And the answer is absolutely no. Besides being a job and a profession, I've been very fortunate. One, I've worked hard, but the doors have just kept opening and opening. Even now, at this part of my career, doors just seem to open because I think people recognize good hard work. They respect somebody who's I think I'm quite musical and experienced, but I'm also not temperamental. I'm demanding of standards, but that does not make me insufferable to work with. I think you have to know what you have to do. So no, I haven't considered stopping. After I retire, I'm going to continue doing work in the field as necessary. I have no grand plans, just to continue. I'm working there. The legacy that I would hope to leave, I'm hoping, is one of just developing people to be professional, to be artistically creatives, but always to be professional in a work, whatever people define that to be. But you must be able to be as strong artistically and technically you can do, but you must interface with your public as a professional. That's a legacy I would like to leave.